The crystal walls of the palace shook as another explosion echoed across the city. Queen Veltara stood at the tall windows of her throne room, watching orange flames rise from the distant streets of her capital. The beautiful blue light that usually danced through her crystal home now flickered like a dying candle. "Your Majesty, we must leave now," said Captain Zektar, the leader of her royal guard. His silver skin was pale with fear, and his forearms trembled as he held his energy weapon. "The rebels are only hours away from the palace." Behind him, 20 of the finest Zephyrian warriors shifted nervously. These were the same guards who had sworn to protect their queen with their lives. They had trained for years in the art of combat. They were supposed to be fearless, but today they were afraid. "Where can we go?" Queen Veltara asked, her voice soft but steady. "The spaceport is under attack. The safe houses in the city are compromised. My people are fighting in the streets." Captain Zektar looked at the floor. "There are ships waiting at the hidden landing pad in the eastern mountains. We can escape to the outer colonies and gather loyal forces there." Escape. The word tasted bitter in the Queen's mouth. "You want me to abandon my people when they need me most?" "Your Majesty, if you die here, the rebellion wins everything," Zektar said. "We can come back when we are stronger." Queen Veltara turned away from the window. Her long, flowing robes seemed to glow with their own inner light. She was beautiful in the way only her people could be, with skin that shifted between silver and blue like moonlight on water. Her eyes held the wisdom of her ancestors, but also the weight of a crown she had worn for only 2 years. "And what about the people who cannot escape?" she asked. "What about the families hiding in their homes? What about the children who are afraid?" Captain Zektar had no answer. That was when Marcus Chen stepped forward. Marcus was human, something that made him stand out in this room full of tall, elegant aliens. He was shorter than everyone else, with dark hair and brown skin that looked rough compared to the smooth perfection of the Zephyrians. He wore a simple black suit instead of armor, and carried only a small sidearm. Marcus worked as a bodyguard for Ambassador Williams, who had come to Zephyria Prime to talk about trade deals between Earth and the Ethereal Dominion. When the rebellion started 3 days ago, the ambassador had been evacuated with the other diplomats. Marcus should have gone with them, but he had stayed. "Your Majesty," Marcus said, his voice calm and clear. "You don't have to run." Captain Zektar laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "Human, this is not your fight. Your people are safe. Go home to your own planet." Marcus looked at the captain, then at Queen Veltara. "I took an oath to protect those under my care. That includes anyone I'm assigned to guard." "You are assigned to guard Ambassador Williams," Zektar said. "He is gone." "I was assigned to this diplomatic mission," Marcus replied. "The mission was to build friendship between our peoples. That mission isn't over just because things got dangerous." Queen Veltara studied the human carefully. She had met many aliens during her short reign, but humans were still new to her. They were a young species that had only joined the galactic community 50 years ago. Most other races saw them as primitive and aggressive, but there was something in Marcus's eyes that she recognized. It was the same thing she saw in her own reflection when she looked in the mirror each morning. Duty, honor, the willingness to do what was right, even when it was hard. "You would stay and fight for a queen who is not your own?" she asked. "I would stay and fight for what's right," Marcus said simply. Captain Zektar stepped between them. "This is madness. Human, you do not understand what you are saying. The rebels have thousands of fighters. They have heavy weapons. They have ships. What can one alien do against such a force?" Marcus smiled, and for a moment Queen Veltara thought she saw something dangerous in that smile. Something that reminded her why humans had earned respect among the stars despite being so young and small. "Captain," Marcus said, "you'd be surprised what one human can do when they decide to make a stand." Another explosion shook the palace, closer this time. Through the windows they could see rebel aircraft flying toward them, dark shapes against the burning sky. Captain Zektar turned to his guards. "Men, we leave in 5 minutes. Gather only what you can carry." One by one, the royal guards filed out of the throne room. Some looked ashamed. Others looked relieved. All of them were afraid. Captain Zektar paused at the door. "Your Majesty, please, come with us. Live to fight another day." Queen Veltara stood silent for a long moment. Then she shook her head. "A queen who runs from her people is no queen at all." Zektar's shoulders sagged in defeat. He looked at Marcus one last time. "I hope you know what you're doing, human." Then he was gone, and the throne room fell silent except for the distant sounds of battle. Queen Veltara and Marcus stood alone in the vast crystal chamber. The room was beautiful, with walls that caught and reflected light in impossible ways. The throne itself was carved from a single piece of blue crystal that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. It was a room made for ceremony and celebration, not for war. "So," Queen Veltara said, sitting down on her throne with careful dignity. "What do we do now, Sir Marcus?" Marcus was already moving, pulling off his suit jacket and rolling up his sleeves. "Now, Your Majesty, we turn your pretty palace into a fortress, and we show these rebels what happens when they threaten a queen under human protection." Outside, the enemy aircraft were getting closer. The sound of their engines filled the air like thunder. But inside the crystal throne room, a human smiled and began to prepare for war. Marcus moved through the throne room like a man with a plan. His hands touched the crystal walls, testing their strength. He looked at the doors, counting them, measuring them with his eyes. He studied the high ceiling and the long windows that let in the dying light of day. Queen Veltara watched him work. She had never seen anyone move with such purpose before. The human's steps were quick but quiet. His eyes missed nothing. In just a few minutes, he had changed from a polite diplomatic guard into something else entirely. Something dangerous. "Your Majesty," Marcus said, kneeling beside her throne, "I need to ask you some questions about this room. Of course, these crystal walls. Are they strong?" "Very strong. They can stop energy weapons and even small explosives." Marcus nodded. "Good. What about those doors?" He pointed to the 3 entrances to the throne room. "The main door is ceremonial. It's beautiful but not very thick. The side doors lead to private chambers. They're stronger. And below us? The crystal foundation goes deep into the mountain. There are storage rooms and old passages beneath the palace." Marcus stood up and walked to one of the tall windows. Far below, he could see rebel forces moving through the palace gardens like ants. They had vehicles and weapons. They moved in organized groups, but they moved like Zephyrians, and Marcus knew how Zephyrians fought. "Your Majesty, I need you to help me move some things." For the next hour, Marcus and Queen Veltara worked together to transform the throne room. Marcus had the Queen help him tip over heavy crystal tables, creating barriers near the doors. He broke off pieces of decorative crystal and shaped them into sharp points, setting them in places where enemies might try to take cover. The Queen's ceremonial crystals, which had been arranged to catch and reflect light beautifully, became part of a defensive maze that would confuse and slow down attackers. Marcus found the palace's emergency supplies in a hidden panel behind the throne. There were basic medical kits, emergency food, and even some old-fashioned projectile weapons that had been stored there since the palace was built. "These are antiques," Queen Veltara said, looking at the strange metal weapons. "Nobody uses bullets anymore." "I do," Marcus said, checking the weapons with expert hands. "Energy weapons are great, but they need power cells. These just need bullets, and I happen to know where humans keep their ammunition." He pulled a small bag from his suit jacket. Inside were metal bullets that gleamed in the crystal light. "You came to a diplomatic meeting armed?" the Queen asked. Marcus smiled. "Your Majesty, humans always come prepared for trouble. It's what we do." As the sun set, the first rebel fighters reached the palace doors. Their voices echoed through the crystal halls as they searched room by room. They expected to find a frightened queen hiding with her guards. Instead, they found empty rooms and silence. The rebels moved carefully through the palace, checking every chamber. They knew the queen was here somewhere. Their spies had told them that her ship never left the landing pad. Captain Mordak led the first group to reach the throne room. He was a big Zephyrian with scars across his silver skin. He had fought in 3 wars before joining the rebellion. He thought he had seen everything. He had never fought a human. Mordak and his 20 fighters approached the main door to the throne room. It was still closed, its crystal surface glowing softly in the dim light. "She's in there," Mordak whispered to his men. "The coward queen is hiding behind her throne. This will be easy." He was wrong. The moment the rebels opened the door, Marcus was ready. He had positioned himself behind an overturned table near the entrance. As the first rebel stepped through the doorway, Marcus fired. The sound of the old projectile weapon was like thunder in the crystal chamber. The bullet hit the rebel in the chest and he fell backward into his companions. The other rebels shouted in surprise and confusion. They had energy shields that could stop laser blasts, but they did nothing against old-fashioned bullets. What was that? One of them yelled. Ancient weapons! Mordek shouted back. Move in formation. But the rebels couldn't move in formation. Marcus had arranged the overturned furniture and broken crystal to create a maze. The rebels had to move single file through narrow passages, which made them easy targets. Marcus knew exactly how Zephyrians fought. They liked to use their energy weapons from a distance. They preferred open spaces where they could use their natural speed and agility. The throne room was no longer an open space. Every time a rebel tried to advance, Marcus was waiting. He fired from different positions, moving through the crystal maze like a ghost. The rebels' energy weapons scorched the walls, but they couldn't get a clear shot at the human. Where is he? Mordek screamed as another of his fighters fell. I don't know, came the reply. He's everywhere. Queen Veltara crouched behind her throne, watching in amazement. She had studied human military history as part of her diplomatic education, but seeing it in person was completely different. Marcus moved like water, flowing from one position to another. He used every piece of cover, every shadow, every reflection in the crystal walls. The rebels had better weapons and more fighters, but Marcus had something they didn't understand. He had experience fighting when everything was against him. After 30 minutes, Captain Mordak called for his men to retreat. Half of his fighters were down and they still hadn't even seen the human clearly. Fall back, he ordered. Seal the doors. We'll starve them out. The rebels pulled their wounded comrades out of the throne room and barricaded the doors from the outside. In the sudden silence, Marcus reloaded his weapon and checked his ammunition. He was down to half his bullets, but the first attack was over. Queen Veltara stood up slowly from behind her throne. That was incredible. Marcus wiped sweat from his forehead. That was just the first wave, Your Majesty. They'll be back with more men and better tactics. How do you know? Because that's what I would do. The queen looked around the throne room. Crystal dust sparkled in the air. Scorch marks from energy weapons decorated the walls. The beautiful chamber looked like a battlefield, but they were still alive. Sir Marcus, she said quietly. Why did you really stay? Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Your Majesty, where I come from, we have a saying. When good people do nothing, evil wins. Today I decided not to do nothing. Outside the barricaded doors, they could hear the rebels talking and planning. More fighters were coming. Soon the real battle would begin. But for now, in the crystal throne room, a human and an alien queen prepared to face the storm together. The rebels did not attack again that night. Instead, they waited. Marcus knew they were planning something. He could hear them moving around outside the throne room, talking in low voices, bringing in equipment. Sometimes he heard the heavy footsteps of more fighters arriving. Queen Veltara sat on her throne watching Marcus work. The human never seemed to rest. He moved around the throne room, improving their defenses, checking his weapons, studying every angle and shadow. Tell me about human warfare, she said during one of his brief stops near her throne. Marcus looked up from the projectile weapon he was cleaning. What do you want to know? Everything. Your people are new to the galaxy, but every other race speaks of human military power with respect. Some even speak with fear. Why? Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to explain. Your Majesty, most races in the galaxy are more advanced than humans. You have better technology, better ships, better weapons. Some of you are stronger or faster or smarter than we are. Then why do they fear you? Because we don't know when to quit. Queen Veltara leaned forward. I don't understand. Marcus set down his weapon and looked at her directly. Most intelligent species are logical. When they're outnumbered or outgunned, they retreat. They make smart decisions based on odds and probability. They cut their losses and live to fight another day. That sounds reasonable. It is reasonable. But humans, we don't always do the reasonable thing. Sometimes we do the right thing instead. Even when the odds are bad. Sometimes we keep fighting when any smart person would surrender. Marcus stood up and walked to one of the crystal walls. He touched a scorch mark left by a rebel energy weapon. My grandfather fought in Earth's last World War, he continued. His unit was surrounded by enemy forces. They were outnumbered 10-1. They had no food, no ammunition, and no hope of rescue. What did they do? They held their position for 6 days. They fought with broken weapons and empty stomachs. They fought until relief forces could break through enemy lines. Queen Veltara was silent for a moment. Did they survive? Some of them, including my grandfather. But that's not the point. The point is that they stayed when they should have run. They fought when they should have surrendered. And because they did, thousands of other people lived. The Queen looked around the throne room at the makeshift defenses and the crystal barriers. Is that what you're doing now? Fighting when you should surrender? Marcus smiled. Your Majesty, I haven't even started fighting yet. Just then, a new sound came from outside the doors. It was a low humming noise that made the crystal walls vibrate. What is that? Queen Veltara asked. Marcus's expression grew serious. Cutting equipment. They're going to slice through the doors. The humming grew louder. Bright light began to appear at the edges of the main door as rebel tools cut through the crystal. Your Majesty, Marcus said, moving to his defensive position, I need to teach you something that humans call psychological warfare. What is that? It's when you use fear as a weapon, when you make your enemies so scared that they make mistakes. The cutting stopped. The throne room doors were weakened but not yet broken. Marcus knew the rebels were preparing for another assault. Listen to me carefully, Marcus said. When the fighting starts, I want you to do something that might seem strange. What? I want you to laugh. Queen Veltara stared at him. Laugh during a battle? Yes, and I want you to speak to the rebels. Tell them who you are. Remind them that they're attacking their own queen. They already know who I am. They know who you are, but they've forgotten what you represent. Right now, to them, you're just a target. A problem to be solved. But you're not just a target, are you? The queen straightened on her throne. No, I am the voice of my people. I am the guardian of their hopes and dreams. Exactly. And humans have learned that sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't a gun or a bomb. Sometimes it's a reminder of what people are really fighting for. The doors exploded inward. This time, the rebels came prepared. They had better armor and heavier weapons. They moved in organized groups using tactics designed to counter Marcus's maze of crystal barriers. But Marcus was ready for them too. The first group of rebels rushed through the main door, expecting to face the same kind of defense as before. Instead, Marcus had moved to a completely different position. His first shots came from the side, catching them by surprise. He's moved, Captain Mordak shouted. Find him! More rebels poured through the side doors. They spread out, trying to surround Marcus's position. Their energy weapons lit up the throne room like a deadly light show. But then Queen Veltara stood up. She stood tall on the steps of her throne, her robes flowing around her like liquid light. She was beautiful and terrible, like a force of nature made flesh, and she laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the laugh of someone who had found something amusing in the middle of chaos. The sound echoed through the crystal chamber, mixing with the noise of battle. My dear Captain Mordak, she called out, her voice clear and strong. Do you remember when you swore your oath of loyalty to the crown? Mordak fired his weapon at her, but Marcus's bullet found him first. The rebel captain fell, clutching his shoulder. I remember when you were just a young soldier, the queen continued, seemingly unaware of the battle raging around her. You came to the palace for the first time. You were so nervous that you forgot to bow. Other rebels turned to stare at their queen. Some of them stopped shooting. Your Majesty, one of them called out. Why don't you surrender? We don't want to hurt you. Queen Veltara laughed again. Hurt me? You think you can hurt me? I am Veltara, daughter of the Crystal Mountains, keeper of the ancient flames. I have the blood of 10,000 years of queens flowing in my veins. Marcus used the distraction to move to another position. The rebels were no longer focused only on finding him. Some of them were listening to their queen. You want to know why I don't surrender? The queen asked. Because surrender is not in my nature. Because I would rather die standing than live kneeling. And because... She pointed directly at Marcus, who was reloading behind an overturned table. Because I have a human fighting beside me. And humans, my dear rebels, do not know the meaning of the word impossible. Marcus finished reloading and smiled. Your Majesty is absolutely right. Then he stood up and opened fire again. But something had changed in the throne room. The rebels were no longer fighting with the same confidence. Some of them were backing toward the doors. Others had stopped shooting entirely. They had come to capture or kill a helpless queen. Instead, they had found a monarch who refused to be broken and a human who refused to quit. And for the first time since the rebellion began, they started to wonder if they had made a terrible mistake. The rebels retreated again, but this time they were different. Marcus could hear it in their voices as they talked outside the throne room. The confidence was gone. In its place was confusion and doubt. Some of them were arguing. She's still our queen, one voice said. She's a tyrant, another replied, but without conviction. Did you see how that human fought? How is one alien holding off all of us? Queen Veltara heard it too. She sat on her throne, listening to her people argue about her fate just beyond the broken doors. It's working, she said quietly to Marcus. Marcus was checking his wounds. A piece of crystal had cut his arm during the last battle, and energy weapon fire had burned his shoulder. The injuries weren't serious, but they hurt. What's working, Your Majesty? What you taught me. The psychological warfare. They're starting to remember who they are. Marcus nodded, but his expression was grim. That's good. But we're running out of time. What do you mean? Marcus pointed to his nearly empty ammunition pouch. I've got maybe 20 bullets left, and I can hear more rebels arriving. A lot more. Queen Veltara looked around the throne room. The crystal walls were cracked and scorched. The beautiful chamber was barely recognizable. Blood stained the floor where rebels had fallen. How long can we hold out? She asked. Against a full assault? Maybe an hour, maybe less. The queen was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, Do you regret staying? Marcus looked at her in surprise. No, Your Majesty. Do you regret not running? No, she smiled sadly. I think I finally understand what it means to be a queen. It's not about the crown or the palace or the power. It's about being willing to stand for what's right even when you're afraid. Even when you're going to lose? Especially then. Marcus cleaned his weapon and checked his remaining bullets one more time. Your Majesty, I need to tell you something. What? If they break through our defenses, if they get past me, I need to know what you want me to do. Queen Veltara understood what he was asking. If the rebels captured them, they might do terrible things to her before they killed her. They might torture her for information or use her as a hostage. I want you to fight until the very end, she said firmly. I want them to remember that they had to destroy their own palace to take down their queen. I want the story to spread across the galaxy that a human died protecting an alien crown. Marcus nodded. It would be an honor, Your Majesty. Outside, the voices grew louder. More rebels were arriving. Marcus could hear the sound of heavy equipment being moved into position. But then something unexpected happened. New voices joined the conversation outside the throne room. These voices were different. They weren't talking about attack plans or weapons, they were talking about honor. I can't do this anymore, one voice said. She's our queen. She didn't deserve to be abandoned. The human has been protecting her for 3 days, another voice added. 3 days? Where were we? We were following orders. A third voice replied, but it sounded weak. Marcus and Queen Veltara looked at each other. Something was changing outside. Some of the rebels are having second thoughts, the queen whispered. Marcus crept closer to the broken door and listened carefully. The argument outside was getting louder. I joined this rebellion to fight corruption, one rebel was saying. But what's corrupted about a queen who refuses to abandon her people? And what's corrupted about an alien who risks his life for someone else's ruler? Another added. Captain Mordak's voice cut through the argument. He was wounded but still in command. It doesn't matter. The revolution must continue. Kill them both. But fewer voices agreed with him now. Marcus returned to Queen Veltara and whispered, Your Majesty, I think some of your people are remembering their loyalty. What should we do? Marcus thought for a moment. Then he smiled. Your Majesty, I think it's time for you to remind them who you really are. Queen Veltara stood up and walked toward the broken doors. Marcus moved to protect her, but she held up her hand. My people, she called out, her voice carrying clearly through the palace halls. I know you can hear me. The arguing outside stopped. I know that some of you are angry with me. I know that some of you think I have failed as your queen. And perhaps you are right, Marcus frowned. This wasn't what he had expected. I am young, the queen continued. I have made mistakes. I have not always understood the needs of my people, but I have tried to do what I thought was right. She stepped closer to the doorway. 3 days ago, when the rebellion began, my guards ran away. They left me here to die. But do you know who stayed? A human, an alien from a world far away, a person who had no duty to protect me, no reason to care if I lived or died. Her voice grew stronger. This human has been wounded fighting for me. He has used his own blood to defend my throne. He has shown more loyalty to your queen than some of you have shown to your own people. Silence stretched through the palace. I will not run away from my responsibilities. Queen Veltara said, I will not abandon my people when they need guidance. If you want to kill me, then come and do it. But know that you are killing someone who loves this world more than her own life." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a single voice spoke from the crowd of rebels. "I will not raise my weapon against my queen." Another voice joined it. "Nor will I." Then, another. "The human shames us." "All," Captain Mordak shouted angrily. "You are all traitors. We have a mission." But his voice was drowned out by others. The mission was wrong. The queen deserves better from us. The human deserves better from us. Marcus heard the sound of weapons being set down. Then he heard footsteps moving away from the throne room. Many of the rebels were leaving, but not all of them. Mordak's voice rang out one more time, filled with rage. "Fine. If you won't finish this, I will." The sound of running footsteps echoed through the halls. Mordak and his most loyal followers were making one final assault. Marcus raised his weapon and prepared for the last battle. But this time, he wouldn't be fighting alone. Captain Mordak charged through the throne room doors with his remaining fighters. There were only 6 of them left, but they were the most dedicated rebels. They had nothing to lose now. Marcus fired his last bullets, dropping 2 of them before they could spread out. But then his weapon clicked empty. "Now you die, human," Mordak screamed, raising his energy weapon. That was when the first loyal Zephyrian appeared in the doorway behind him. It was Servan, a young palace guard who had fled with the others 3 days ago. His silver face was marked with shame, but his weapon was pointed at the rebels. "Captain Mordak," Servan said quietly, "step away from our queen." Mordak spun around in surprise. You ran away like all the others." "Yes," Servan said, "and I have spent 3 days hating myself for it. While I was hiding in the city, a human was doing my job. While I was safe, an alien was protecting my queen." More loyal guards appeared behind Servan, then palace staff, then ordinary citizens who had come to the palace when they heard about the human stand. "Look around you, Mordak," Queen Veltara said from her throne. "Look at what your rebellion has accomplished. You wanted to divide my people, but instead you have united them." Mordak looked around the throne room. He was surrounded by dozens of loyal Zephyrians, all pointing weapons at him and his remaining fighters. But his eyes kept returning to Marcus. The human stood beside the queen's throne, wounded and exhausted, holding an empty weapon. He should have been helpless, but somehow he looked more dangerous than ever. "You," Mordak said, pointing at Marcus, "you destroyed everything. If you had just left with your ambassador, none of this would have happened." Marcus smiled tiredly. "You're probably right. But then who would have protected her? We could have killed her quickly, cleanly. Now there will be more war, more fighting." "No," Queen Veltara said, standing up from her throne. "Now there will be justice." She walked down the steps toward Mordak, ignoring his weapon. "You and your followers will be arrested and tried for treason, but you will be given fair trials because that is what separates a queen from a dictator." Mordak's weapon trembled in his hands. "You should have died." "Perhaps, but I didn't, and do you know why?" She gestured toward Marcus. "Because a human taught me that sometimes the most important thing isn't whether you win or lose. Sometimes the most important thing is that you stand up and fight for what's right." Servan and the other guards moved in to arrest the remaining rebels. Mordak didn't resist. The fight had gone out of him. As the rebels were led away, Queen Veltara turned to Marcus. "Sir Marcus," she said formally. "Kneel." Marcus looked confused, but he went down on one knee before her throne. "By the ancient authority of the Crystal Crown, I name you Sir Marcus Chen, first guardian of the realm, protector of the royal house and defender of the people." A gasp went up from the crowd of Zephyrians. No alien had ever been given such a high rank in their government. "Your Majesty," Marcus said, "I'm honored, but I'm not one of your people." "You are now," Queen Veltara replied. "You have proven that loyalty has nothing to do with the color of your skin or the world where you were born. You have proven that courage can come from anywhere." She placed her hand on his shoulder. "Rise, Sir Marcus. Rise and accept the gratitude of a people who will never forget what you did for their queen." Marcus stood up, still looking stunned. Servan stepped forward. "Sir Marcus, if you'll have us, we would like to learn from you." "Learn what?" "How to be guards worthy of our queen. How to protect what matters even when we're afraid." Marcus looked around the throne room. The crystal walls were cracked and burned. The beautiful chamber would need months of repair. But it was still standing just like the queen. "The first lesson," Marcus said, "is simple. You don't protect a person because of their title or their rank. You protect them because it's the right thing to do. He looked directly at Queen Veltara. Your queen doesn't need protection because she's royal. She needs protection because she's worth protecting. Over the following months, the story of the human stand spread across the galaxy. Diplomats told it in their reports. Traders shared it in spaceport bars. Children heard it as a bedtime story. The story of how a single human defended an alien queen when her own people abandoned her. The story of how sometimes the right person in the right place can change everything. Marcus stayed on Zephyria. Prime as the head of the Queen's new guard. He trained a generation of young Zephyrians in human military tactics. But more importantly, he taught them about human values. About loyalty that didn't depend on personal gain, about courage that didn't require perfect odds, about doing the right thing even when it was hard. Queen Veltara's reign became known as one of the greatest in Zephyrian history. She ruled with wisdom and compassion, always remembering the lesson she had learned in her crystal throne room. Sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't technology or force. Sometimes it's the simple decision to stand up and fight for what's right. And sometimes, when the guards desert and the odds are impossible, all it takes is one person who refuses to give up, even if that person is human. Years later, when other alien races asked Queen Veltara why she trusted humans so completely, she would smile and point to the crystal throne room. The walls had been repaired, but she had left the scorch marks from the battle. She left them as a reminder that when everything seemed hopeless, when all seemed lost, a human had stood beside her throne and proved that heroism wasn't about species or technology or superior firepower. It was about choosing to do the right thing, even when you were afraid. Especially when you were afraid. The galaxy was a dangerous place, full of wars and conflicts and impossible choices. But it was also a place where a human could become the guardian of an alien crown, and where a queen could learn that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from the power to rule, but from the courage to stand.